So we're live now. Welcome to the 12th session of the Africa Soft Power series, a summit focused on how Africa can harness its soft power to transform its trajectory. Many of us are really shattered about the untimely passing of our superhero. As the Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman inspired a generation of Black people across the globe, bringing us together in celebration of our Blackness and reminding us that our destinies are intertwined. This is why our session today, Global Africans, Building and Redefining the Continent, is particularly poignant. We're here with a phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal group of young, dynamic, and influential global Africans who are inspiring a new generation of Africans to believe in themselves and reach for the sky. Please let us observe a minute of silence to remember Chadwick, his family, and all the other heroes who battled and lost their lives to cancer. Long live the king. I want to say thank you to all our strategic partners and media partners for supporting this project. And finally, I'm really proud to introduce our lead discussant for today, Ava Hall. Ava is former Vice President, Programming and Brand Advancement at BET International. She was the mastermind behind BET's International Program and Development, on-air creative and channel operations for all the international channels. With Ava's leadership, BET International grew in distribution over 55 countries, including the UK, France, South Korea, and across the continent, ultimately reaching 35 million households. Lauded as the Empress of Global Entertainment and Culture, Ava ensured international artists had a bright spotlight in the US and championed connections between artists and audiences around the world. In many cases, Ava helped launch the careers of international talent across the globe. Ava is currently founder and CEO of Ava Lizette Living, a positive inspiration lifestyle brand. Before Ava starts, Obi will say a few words.
I just want to everybody today. You know, today it's a sad day for us in the community, but I just wanted to say that, you know, for us in Africa, when a king died, and with that spirit, I'd like to hand over to Ava and welcome everybody to have a great conversation.
Thank you, Nkiru. Thank you, Obi. It is quite a pleasure to be here with you all. And thank you to the Africa South Power Project for putting this amazing and timely panel discussion together. Today, we're going to be discussing global Africans building and redefining the continent. As we've mentioned today, Chadwick Boseman has left us, and we are feeling it for sure, and he will never be forgotten. But it does lend itself into, I think, quite timely into this discussion. I heard him I was playing back some of the recent kind of acceptance speeches around Black Panther. And he said about the cast and working on that project was, you know, it was very clear that they were young, gifted, and Black. But more than anything, what it did for him was helped him create and helped him show the world what the world they could live in would be and could be. And I think we've all found that Wakanda has been beloved by the global Black community. And I think it's a great way to kind of start this conversation. And I like to say, I guess, young gifted in African for today. And before we start, I'd love to introduce the dynamic group of panelists that have been curated for today, starting with Michael Armitage. He is a Kenyan-born artist currently living and working between London and Nairobi, a graduate of fine arts from the Slade School of Fine Art. He has been lauded as one of the most exciting young voices in contemporary painting. His work weaves multiple narratives that are drawn from historical and current news media, internet gossip, and his own ongoing recollections of Kenya. He is exhibited globally in key galleries, including Halsdane Kunst, Fondazione Centre de Bengo, and the 58th Venice Biennale, Novo Foundation, the MoMA, and White Cuba. Using rich color palettes and a dream-like imagery, his work depicts the reality of Kenya's sometimes harsh politics, social inequalities, violence, and extreme disparities in wealth, society, and the natural environment. Chiney Ogwumike is a Nigerian-American professional basketball player from the Los Angeles Sparks, the women's National Women's Basketball Association. As of August 2020, she became the first Black woman to host a national radio show for ESPN, also being the first WNBA player to do so as well. She is one of the youngest commentators to be named a full-time NBA analyst for ESPN while simultaneously playing in the WNBA. Chiney is a graduate of Stanford University who majored in international relations. She played in 3 Final Fours and finished as the conference leading scorer and rebounder as of January 2014. As of 2016, Ogwumike was elected vice president of the WNBA Players Association. She has endorsement deals with Adidas and AT&T. Jidenna is a Grammy Award nominated multi-platform rapper, singer, songwriter, producer, and actor, an international sonic pioneer who quietly paved the way for the 21st century Afropolitan musical revival. Since 2015, he has distinguished himself as a rare talent equally at home on a playlist by President Barack Obama, on the court of the 2020 NBA All-Star Celebrity Game, on screen in Marvel's Luke Cage and HBO's Insecure, or on his YouTube show, The Lit Review, a Black man's book club hosted by the Intoxicated Uncles. Clocking just shy of 1 billion total streams and views and receiving worldwide acclaim, he continues to elevate the playing field with a series of singles and his forthcoming 3rd album. Pearl Thusi is a South African actress, model, television host, and radio personality. Pearl has made great strides both on the African continent and internationally, breaking glass ceilings and paving the way for future talent in the creative industries. She's played the lead actress in Netflix's first original series, African series, Queen Sono. Prior to Queen Sono, she was in the cast of the American series Quantico, alongside Bollywood actress Priyanka Chopra. The multi-talented actress has also starred in numerous local and international feature films, including Scorpion King, Book of Souls, Kalushi Tremors, Tremors 5, Bloodlines, and Rhythm City. She's the first person on the continent to collaborate with the international cosmetics giant MAC. Ibrahim Mahama is a Ghanaian author and artist. He has been recognized by the African Report as one of the most influential 100 Africans in 2019. His work was shown during the 56th International Art Exhibit in the Venice Biennale. In Italy, All the World's Futures. A graduate of the painting and sculpture from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, he was the youngest artist featured in the Ghana Pavilion in the 58th Biennale de Venezia. He has exhibited globally, including Nantes Museum, Norval Foundation, and the Whitworth Art Gallery. In March 2019, he opened SCCA Tamale, an artist-run space dedicated to retrospectives of practices which emerged from the 20th century. His work examines materials and labor conditions of society, forms related to the Second World War, and architectural forms within history, and inspired by the potentialities and failures of modernity. Okay, welcome everyone, and let's get started. So I'd like to start off by asking the question, what does it mean to be African? And what is African heritage to you, and how do you celebrate it? And let's just do a round table. We'll start with Pearl.
Hi everyone, hi again. What does it mean to be African? For me, being an African, the first thing I think of the soil and how enriched and beautiful the soil we have in Africa is. We have a continent with the richest amount of mineral resources, and I think people who carry that type of wealth within them, whether they know it or whether they don't. And I try and carry that with me everywhere I go, with everything that I do. So being an African, kind of just as a South African specifically, we have something we call Ubuntu. And that basically means that I am because you are. So understanding that we all are connected in all different parts of the world, whether we are in separate countries, in the same city, we are all connected in a very, very special way. And it means we have a rich history. It means that we are powerful beings. And it means that, for me, we have a really incredible history and a lot of information that we still have to learn and live according to. So yeah, I think for me, to keep it very short and sweet, it just means, especially as a woman, it means power, it means wealth, and it means just a very rich history is what I immediately think of.
Beautiful. Michael.
Thanks so much for having me. I love exactly what Pearl said, to be honest. I am because you are. That feels pretty fundamental. But I suppose simply because I think there's so many variations and ways of being and having been on or being from the continent. I mean, I would consider it the place that I always think of as home.
Home, okay. Jidenna.
I think oftentimes, we think about what African is to us now, or what our African identity is now. I'd like to answer the question of what Africa or the African identity will be. I think because we're so ethnically diverse, I imagine a continent that feels and exalts itself in that diversity. And what that means is it accepts the diversity on the continent and the diversity in the diaspora. I imagine an African identity or a culture across the continent that is open and safe for women, that we become the beacons of light to the world as far as a safe space for women, or people who may have different types of religious or sexual orientations. I imagine an African identity that really trades openly our goods, our services, and has a renaissance period, because we won't have an enlightenment and we won't have the progress that we all talk about unless we really remember the history that Pearl talked about at the top of this panel. If we remember it, embody it, then we will see it and really see a new Africa. So I think that we're at a point where we have to remember traditions, get rid of some, and create new ones.
Beautifully said. Ibrahim.
Hello. Yeah, I think I quite agree with what all the panelists have said so far. And for me, I think I'm more interested in creating new perspectives. For instance, on the continent, there are a lot of interesting histories which have somehow been shelved or ignored. I always find that we have a very short memory when it comes to looking at the history of the continent. It's either we always look so far back as slavery, or we look at just like let's say the post-independence era. But I have been trying as much as possible to look at maybe the history of the continent across time, and trying to see if as an artist, maybe one can make some kind of an intersection which creates maybe a new way for us to like reimagine what the future can be, but using the past as an inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Chiney?
I'm glad to be here with everyone. This is really special, especially in the times we're in. Thinking about what is Africa, I always get taken back to the quote by Kwame Nkrumah, because I was born and raised in Houston, Texas, but to Nigerian parents in a Nigerian home in America. I am African not because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. Meaning, being African is not necessarily everyone likes to see from the outside as a destination or put a label on it, but really it's a spirit, it's a mentality, it's an energy that really can't be stopped. It's a force. And being a product of the diaspora, there are a lot of challenges where we sort of feel like we have to prove our African nature. Like I don't speak Igbo, I'm Nigerian, but I speak quite a bit. And I feel just as African because history matters and understanding and appreciating our culture. And so we can create, like, as everyone said, a new one. So African to me is the spirit, the mentality that can't be denied, because despite world perspectives, we are the ones that continue to push forward and create, not just for ourselves, but for so many others. I think right now, the period we're in, we're starting to see the Black culture not as one thing that is one thing, it's actually a summation of so many beautiful different things. And I think Africa is a great example of how everything in harmony can produce so many beautiful moments and cultural shifts. And I think people woke up this morning with a new appreciation of that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, beautifully said. I mean, clearly there has been a paradigm shift with so many things. I think something big that kind of catapulted that, it was Black Panther. And there's so many other kind of movements that are helping to push the paradigm shift. And we're seeing so many diverse group of Africans and people of African heritage who are achieving so much success in various industries, as really exemplified here with this this panel. But how does the visibility and representation in the media, how has it helped change kind of this monolithic view that I think the world has once had? How do you think it's helped change the continent, and what more can we do to push that agenda forward? Who wants to jump at that one?
I'm happy to chip in on that. I don't think you can rely on the media to provide any sort of reliable or interesting image of what the continent is, what happens on the continent, and also what we can or will be. It speaks way too simply to things, and quite frankly, it generally tends to repeat itself and to repeat the loudest voices. I think certainly to me, what's perhaps more interesting are when you take it down and you get into much smaller kind of aspects of culture and society, where, it isn't just about, the positive things, but the negative things. And it's the way that cultures deal with that and reflect on that and kind of find a way forward and define ourselves within that becomes interesting. Because maybe the thing that to me, like the media aspect of it and the representation of oneself does do is provide quite a large board in which to then be able to fight against or push against, and also then subsequently define yourself and what your own culture is, and you can also see very quickly, however positive the impetus is behind, behind a story or a narrative, that it always forgets quite a lot of the other things that are going on and happening at the same time. And I think it can be equally damaging to maybe push any one thing too hard without allowing space for all the other narratives to exist.
Yeah. Yeah. In your, go ahead, Pearl. Yep.
I just wanted to add to that. That was great. And for me, I think in sometimes a much simpler way. And when I heard media and Africa and how Africa is seen, or Africans are seen around the world, I think back to when I did a movie called Catching Feelings, and it was the first movie. It was actually not my first time doing a first with Netflix. The first thing was, it was the first film they acquired from the continent, and put out there, and it did really well. And I remember when I went over for a festival in LA, at which the film was being shown. Actually, I had 2 films showing that time, and just the amount of people coming to me saying, we've never seen Africans in this particular way. We've never seen just an urban African couple in South Africa going through the motions of being in a relationship. Like, yes, we also actually have that as Africans, just like everybody else. You know what I mean? And I think like African Americans maybe who'd never traveled but have a great interest in African culture and people, and even many Caucasians were very, very excited just to see a different idea about Africans. And I think that's what inspired us to create Queen Sono, to continue the idea that, hey, we are intelligent, we are able to create. And I think for me, I mean, people who are in the visual arts and musicians, I think Jidenna will know, that's what I love about Nigerian music and Nigerian Nollywood, is that once the content is created by Africans, for Africans, and shown to the rest of the world, not because it was meant for the world, that for me is when you really get a clearer idea through media. I guess that the question is, it depends which media is showing that content and who created that content. But again, media can sometimes not be trusted because it can be bought. However, based from my experience and how contributed through the medium I work through, we've been able to create a different dimension or show a different dimension of what Africans live like, or what they do, how they think, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's amazing to have all of these different kind of point of views, but making sure that there is space for different points of views and different kind of visuals and stories of Africa. Like with the release of Beyonce's Black is King and Burner's latest kind of project, and the world is listening much more to things that are coming from the continent, things that are about the continent. And then we're also seeing kind of collaborations, kind of this connecting and building bridges. What do you think about these collaborations? And do you feel like it's kind of any cultural appropriation, those kind of claims? Do you think that's legitimate?
I want to say that I think that when we look at these collaborations, or when we see Africans, African Americans, Caribbean Americans using or being inspired by some culture that they are not part of or weren't born into, our quickest reaction is to say cultural appropriation. But there's a difference between cultural exchange and cultural appropriation. Appropriation has no respect, no regard to the author and the owners. Do I think that happens? Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. We appropriate each other regardless of our skin tone. But do I think that there's more exchange going on than appropriation? Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think that we should be so quick to be binary, like it's either black or white. A brief history of the rosary that we know for Catholics and Christianity. The rosary came to be because Marco Polo and that whole Silk Road that went across from Europe to Asia had a bunch of traders and merchants. On that road, Christians were walking, and they traveled as far as Asia, where they encountered a few religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, which all use these beads to pray. On their way back, they bought these beads. And when they took it back to Europe, they added a cross with a man called Jesus Christ on the end of that bead. Were they appropriating? Were they inspired? And did they create something new? And I wrote a caption about this when I saw the Black is King comments. I said, you know, yeah, could there be some appropriation in that? There's arguments for it for sure. But is when Burna wears a grill, is he appropriating people, Black Americans in the States, or is he inspired when he comes and lives in LA for a while? Within Nigeria, when an Igbo man like myself is gonna wear a Hausa hat, and I have some Yoruba item, or I go to South Africa or Kenya and get some beads and wear it around my wrist, am I appropriating, or am I letting the cultures that are around me become part of me? So I want us to be open to the times we are in. We are not in the old days where everybody is just local and we only know what we know. Social media has changed everything. It's made everybody around us appear more human. And I think that Africans around the world, on the continent, within our countries, within our ethnicities, are being more inspired than ever before. So I think that there's more exchange going on than appropriation, and we should accept it.
Yeah. Yeah. Ibrahim, you are ranked as one of the most influential Africans. As an artist, how do you approach the responsibility to highlight the beauty and complex realities of the continent?
Well, thank you very much, Ava. For me, in school, there was quite a lot that we had to deal with, you know, by just the fact that sometimes you are working or practicing from the continent. It comes with a lot of challenges in itself. But one of the things that we had to learn in school was to use the conditions or the challenges that we've inherited as a starting point in itself. As I mentioned earlier, our generation, we're trying as much as possible to somehow look at the histories that we've inherited and see how, as artists, we can intervene within those histories. So for instance, one of the things, key elements within my work was trying to really understand the contradictions within the way capital plays. Because as an artist, when you make a work of art, the work translates from a mere object into something that becomes, like, let's say, that becomes really culturally significant. So it also generates a certain value as in terms of like money physically. So what really happens within that? Is it just a means to an end, or can the image which is created out of the system of art somehow come back to really affect, let's say, the space or society in which the work is produced from? So in my case, I thought that being an artist comes with a huge responsibility. So by making a painting, it doesn't just end there with regards to the stories or the images that are within it. When it translates into money, how is the money then used then to create, let's say, intervene within the system and create new spaces, which can then now be a gift back to the society? So for instance, children who would never have the opportunity to go to a museum because most African works or works from the periphery always end up in Western institutions. How can we create local institutions that these children can inherit and somehow change their worldview? So responsibility, I think, generally comes within taking ownership of the means of production and acknowledging that there are a lot of contradictions in the world and using those contradictions as a starting point to change our physical narrative within a given time.
Wow. Amazing. I'd like to turn to Pearl as well. With some of the work that you've accomplished, particularly on popular shows like Quantico and obviously Queen Sona, which I'm a huge fan of, do you feel pressure to be the standard by which African actresses are measured?
Pressure which African, I feel the pressure to make any actress who dreams to do what I have done and what I'm still dreaming of doing. I wish to make them proud, but to have any inclination of me being that standard, would make me feel like maybe I'm entitled, or I don't know. I don't think I could think that highly of myself. But yes, I worry about that maybe a little, but I feel like with the actress, with Lupita, you know, and all the other incredible actresses who are part of Black Panther and many other actresses who've done incredible things. I think maybe because I'm Black, there's a difference in looking in someone like Charlize Theron, you know, who's achieved it. Is she African or is she not African? Well, technically she's born in Africa. She identifies as an African, but she's white. And she was the first African woman, if I'm not mistaken, to win an Oscar. But do we then make it Black African woman if it were to be, well, like Lupita did, you know? For me, that's that there's already many African actresses who I've been inspired by, or maybe they have African roots that have inspired me to get to where I am. But to feel any pressure, I feel like there's a lot of incredible women about to do great things. If you look at Blood and Water, the young actresses there did an incredible job. The show is incredibly popular. And so I guess I put a lot of pressure on myself, but I cannot say that I have ever thought about what the rest of the world will think.
Yeah, deep. That's deep. Michael, in your work, how do you balance the need for modernity and without forsaking your roots as well?
I don't, I mean, like for me, those aren't really, I wouldn't approach my work in that way. Like, I think from my position, you know, I grew up with a certain heritage, which is from growing up in Nairobi. The art scene there, the artists that are the reason that I'm an artist probably today, they're the ones that I grew up looking at, you know, they shaped how I think in quite a deep way. Then, you know, I had quite a long time studying in the UK where, you know, there's a whole other culture and a whole other set of languages and ways of thinking about art and making art, and a very different history. To then sit and reflect on modernity as an idea wasn't something that I was interested in. I was more interested in reflecting on the situation that I find myself, however somebody else wants to define that. And that is with a history. That is with a history that's also very poorly articulated and represented, but is nonetheless important and extraordinary, you know. And I suppose, like, one of the things that I found incredibly frustrating is because of the lack of articulation and voices to really represent the art that I grew up with, the artists that I grew up with, and with really quite dumb narratives being put forward, you know, like the usual things like primitive or naive, or, you know, like all these things speaking of generations to come before me. And then going to a place where that is basically the way that someone would look at my culture and my history and the sort of stuff that I was interested in engaging with. Like the frustration of that and the injustice as well, that from my eyes, that is being done to the ones that have come before me, you know. And it's all very well that, you know, someone who's relatively young like myself, who has had, you know, relative success and visibility, but to have that without recognizing the artists that have come before and that basically have created the space in which I exist and I work. And for me, are the ones that are the reason. If there is something interesting that I'm doing, it's because they're the ones that set me up, basically. If that's what modernity is, which is now, you know, and if that's what my roots are as well, then it's not a conscious decision to sit and try and articulate that. It's just, for me, in my work, I just reflecting on how I see things in the world and the things that I come in contact with.
Yeah. Understood. Understood. And well put. Chiney, you're Igbo, you're Nigerian, you're African, you're American. How have you learned to navigate the world and kind of harnessed all your identities?
I've sort of been lucky in the sense that my parents, obviously both Nigerian, have sort of instilled within us this concept that we are fortunate to have like the best of both worlds, in the sense that we have that Nigerian determination. We literally say, Naija no de carry last, right? Like we're never going to give up. And then we also are coupled with the American opportunity by being born and raised. And I say we, I'm one of four. I have three sisters, and my sister's well, sorry, you told us not to cuss. I just had to stop. She's a real trailblazer. She's a WNBA MVP. She's the president of the Players Association. I have two younger sisters. One's in medical school and one's in business school. So a very Niger household here in the States. But growing up, I think, Jidenna made a really good point about how we need to sort of reevaluate what we think about what tradition is. Tradition, we must honor it, we must uphold it. But I think we're in this generation where we sort of have to like upgrade it and take ownership of it as the next generation, in the sense that we have to, so I guess the best way to describe it in my identities, born in a household with 4 girls, being Igbo, my dad's an Igbo man, the firstborn in his siblings, there's an expectation based on, our patriarchal culture that he should have a son, but he had 4 girls. And so being born and raised in Houston, we were constantly confronted, my dad, my parents, and I remember these moments vividly, confronted with, don't you want a son to carry on your name? My dad would always say, my girls can kick your sons, like they're awesome, my girls are awesome. And he never questioned it, but he had a lot of pressure on him. And for him to sort of instill within us this idea that we're not less than just because we're women, and also work hand in hand with my mom, who really just has attacked the world and he's empowered. And to see this as a young girl growing up, a dad that says we're worthy and values us, a mom that has been empowered, we sort of attack the world with reckless abandon, also understanding how grateful we are to be here in the US and capitalize on opportunities, but also how it's important for us to go back home and to maintain our cultural awareness and education. And so all of those identities, I guess, sort of came to a front when I started crossing over into the professional realm. Being a basketball player, we're constantly, a female basketball player, we're constantly being compared to men. And so I guess that's when my first reality check got hit. It's like, oh, I'm the best at what I do, but people don't care. What are we going to do about that? Are we going to allow people to define us by what they believe? Or are we going to work and continue to strive to create our own narrative? And I think that's something that a lot of women deal with every day. But also, I was in a position internally where when I go back home to Nigeria, I had to prove my Africanness, my love of being Nigerian. Just because I can't speak, I'm still working. I've got the rice down, and I can't do a goosey soup yet, but like I'm still, my family puts pressure on me for it. But we feel like as women, in one sense, my identity, we have to prove to the world our worth. And then also, part of the diaspora, we have to prove our worth. But the beautiful thing I think that's happening right now, as Jidenna said, is it's like that cultural exchange, that energy, where for the first time, I think we are all products of this millennial generation where we are curious about our heritage and we're curious about others that identify similarly as us. And we're willing to collaborate. For so long, like, I feel like we've had an African mentality of competitive nature, where we have to be the best, we have to be the first. Listen to our parents when they talk about, oh, my son has done this, my daughter has done that. It's always that jockeying, right? But like our generation has sort of stopped that. And we're starting to look into each other. And it's cool because I look at this panel, I've seen a couple people that I've met on different instances through our own passions, like coming and loving basketball, going to a musical event, like watching and supporting Girl Pearl. Like I love Quantico. Like that's what I do after I come home and I watch all your stuff. So, it's just cool because for so long, I think we felt like we've been on islands fighting our own fights in improving ourselves because of our identity, because history has not been written by us, but now we sort of have the pens to write it, and we can't write it by ourselves. We sort of have to literally do it together, because that can't be denied.
I love
Awesome.
that about this generation. Sorry, I just wanted to come in and say that, like 100%. Like, it's one of the most exciting things about being in this generation is a sense of togetherness and finding all these different islands, you know.
Yeah. And I like to pose this to, yeah, go ahead, Pearl.
I agree with everything Chiney said, and also at the same time disagree and agree with Michael, because I'm finding there's a lot of unresolved like business, you know, within the Black culture, right? We're all different shades here. Some of us are catching some smoke for singing Brown Skin Girl. You know, we're not as united. You know what I mean? Like, some of us are catching fires. But the point I'm trying to make is, for me, like, there's, with us feeling empowered and feeling heard and hearing each other, and suddenly for a long time, the ones who haven't had a voice, it seems, there's now like bickering within the African or Black diaspora. Like, now it's like there's other little conversations starting, and this is the time, this is the moment that we need to take and like shoot straight through the sky. But now we're bickering about who's more right than the next person, who has more right to the glory that, you know, Black and Africa have right now, who really is entitled and is the custodian of that. No, you are to this to speak this way, you are to that, you know. There's so much, I don't know, maybe if it's just on the continent for those of us who are on this continent, or maybe it's a worldwide thing, but there's also a lot happening that's going to draw us back if we don't focus and move forward. Just to say, like, I think thought leaders are united and people have intellectual constructive criticisms with each other, but there's also a lot happening where people who, it's like people who were caged have been let to fly, and it's just, maybe it's just me because I've caught the smoke, but
No, it's everybody.
Well, let me pose this to everybody then. So what do you think needs to happen to build stronger bridges between the continent and the diaspora?
Well, one, I think it's time. It's just a natural evolution. The bickering that Pearl's talking about, but also the unity at the same time. It's a natural thing. Humans fear what they don't know, what they don't understand, what they don't see. The more we see each other, the more we talk, the less that we will bicker over the small things and celebrate the similarities. My friend Jessica Nabongo was the first documented African woman. She's from Uganda, originally grew up in the States, to travel to every country in the world.
Yeah.
And I asked her, I said, Jessica, what is the biggest takeaway that you got from traveling to every country in the world? Because you have a perspective that very few people on the planet have ever had. And she said, the first thing is that people are more similar than they are different. That's a woman that traveled to every country in the world. So what do you think she would say to Africans in the diaspora on the continent? She would probably say that that is the case even more so for us. So I think recognizing that truth, time, and then leadership and understanding of our history. When people talk about African identity, or Chiney, you were talking about how we feel about being in the diaspora and having to prove the Africanness. I struggled with that early on. Now I don't care about it at all, because I know that the way our country, I'm looking at heads of states right now in Africa that wear suits and use iPhones and then go to court and swear on the Bible or the Quran. How African is that? And yet we may not be fluent in our native tongues, but may know that certain facts about where we come from, how we are, have a certain perspective. In fact, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Kwame Nkrumah both studied in historically Black colleges and universities. They both went to Lincoln University. Nkrumah encouraged Nnamdi Azikiwe to come. Nkrumah met W.B. Du Bois. They both became Marcus Garveyites. And Marcus Garvey was from Jamaica. Du Bois is from America. Nkrumah and Azikiwe are from Nigeria and Ghana. When Nkrumah and Azikiwe went back to what was formerly their colonized territories, they called for independence and founded the nations of Ghana and Nigeria. They did that because they embraced the diaspora embraced them. And that was the power of independence. We know that Black people or African people will never be respected anywhere on the planet until Africa is. So we all know the roots of the tree and that whole metaphor, but truly the leaves, when they wither, they're withering because the roots have not been watered. So I think as long as we keep that in mind and have leaders like many of you on the panel today, then we'll learn to not bicker over the petty things and to celebrate the oneness.
Beautifully said, Professor. There's also this Black Lives Movement matter that's happening, in the US, and I think it's reverberating around the globe. How are you guys feeling about this movement, and how has it touched you in your respective parts of the world?
In South Africa, we have been very inspired mostly to start addressing issues. I think this touches on the point I said earlier about when there isn't a racial, we were not live yet, about when you have a racial thing to stand on to say, this is why we need to discuss this. So here it's not a racial thing, but police brutality is still a thing. There's a young, disabled boy who just got killed by a South African policeman. So I think that for me, that raises the question, is police brutality a power thing? Just like rape is not a thing about sex, it's a thing about power. So is it a thing about power, or is it a thing about race at all? Because it's happening in South Africa, but now this is not a racial thing anymore. Is it a thing of Black lives just not being respected even by Black people? So this message is not just for white people. This message is for all people of all colors, including the very color we are discussing. Because if in South Africa, predominantly Black policemen are attacking Black children and Black people, and not being sensitive to the issues that affect Black people when we go to a police station, then so the conversation has been very interesting here to discuss, what does Black Lives Matter mean for us when we are talking to specifically Black lives about our own? Yeah. And for us, that's been very interesting. And I think we also had what I call Afrophobic attacks on our fellow brothers and sisters from other parts of Africa. There was a thing of South Africans cannot say Black Lives Matter because they stood and watched as their brothers and sisters were attacked by their own citizens. And it's I think ignited a lot of important conversation that needs to happen worldwide for communities in every society worldwide. So I think it's well done to everybody who had to stand up, and condolences to everybody's life who's had to be lost for this conversation to really start and catch a fire and spread all over the world.
Yeah. Chiney, I know you recently made some powerful statements about the Black Lives Matter movement. And as an athlete and a person of color, I mean, we've recently seen within the NBA and LeBron and athletes using their platform and taking a stand. How important do you think it is to use a platform to bring awareness to social issues?
I think a lot of people are seeing this movement through obviously activism and the protests, but also through the sports world, just because I've told a lot of people, and I heard this best from my teammate Candace Parker, that in the sports world, the WNBA is 80% Black. and the NBA is 75% Black. The NFL is around like 65% Black. In our worlds that we operate in on a day-to-day, we are the majority of the minority, meaning we are mainly Black women that report back to our community. A lot of the time when it comes to this movement and this moment, I think we feel a lot of pressure because the burden has been put on us to sort of cry and to have people understand what our realities are, but we're not the ones that can fix it. We're the ones that hopefully can leverage our relationships to make someone else empathize with us. And to me, that's unfortunate because it's been for so long, it feels like willful ignorance, right? And so now I think through the pandemic, it was interesting to see with coronavirus that within, in my lens, in my experience here in the States, we showed that as a world, we can unify and really celebrate the people that matter, the essential workers and everyone that has helped us get through that moment. We can stop literally the world to address something that is a threat. But why can't we keep that same energy when it comes to an existential threat that we invoked in the inception of our country and heal? And I think a lot of times what you're seeing now are the symptoms of a greater disease that has been created. And now it feels like we still have the added burden as Black people to be held responsible for fixing, which is not the case. And so in the sports world, I think because I always tell people like it's in our DNA. I started playing basketball at the age of 10. And they taught us like, okay, you got to care about the last player on the bench as much as you care about yourself. You have to strive to win a championship, strive to win, to achieve a common goal. That is what we've been doing all day, every day. And I think a lot of people think you assume for us because our success as NBA players, as WNBA players, as athletes, as entertainers, as influencers, they see the success and they see it in isolation, but they don't understand that our success is the exception and not the norm. It's not the norm for most people that look like us, no matter where you are. And so now, it's been really interesting to see how this collective action of athletes choosing to not play, what was that? It feels like every quarantine day is like a year, like maybe 2 days ago, not to play, sort of shocked a lot of people, but they don't understand that, everyone is going through these experiences in real time. We're all humans. But it's not like one experience. It's not one name in Jacob Blake or one name in Breonna Taylor, one name in George Floyd, one name in Ahmaud Arbery. Like the names are things we have been seeing collectively. And now we've made a collective decision that we are dealing with trauma. And we are dealing not just with, and I know I'm speaking for myself, but, and I have a unique experience, but it's generational trauma that we are dealing with and we're trying to sort of bring to the forefront. And, as a Black woman, especially one that so when the boycott happened in sports, it happened to me live when we were on our show. Granted, this new radio show I have, that was day 8. So this was new for me. I was getting texts from my sister who was literally walking to the courts as president of the WNBA to talk to the players who were trying to decide in real time if they were gonna play. It does feel different for Black women just because consistently, I think Black women haven't been celebrated in the way that they deserve. And so in that moment and in this movement, just as we have fought for justice for George Floyd, we're still awaiting justice for Breonna Taylor. And it sort of feels subliminal that, that's just sort of how history has been. And the beautiful thing though, is that I'm a part of More Than a Vote, which is a coalition started by LeBron James of athletes and entertainers to come together. And LeBron has done amazing work for the community. I mean, his I Promise School, this man has all the resources, literally $1 billion due, but even he has realized that he can't do it by himself. So he started bringing people together to start creating this change. And I guess it was really interesting being a part of this group. Not too long ago, they announced the More Than a Vote group that they had enabled Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles to be a voting place, because we're not here telling people who to vote for. I think throughout these protests, we're telling people that your vote matters because your vote is a direct reflection of what you want to see in your community. And I think that gets lost in the media cycles of the Black Lives Matter movement, and this is happening on the streets. As I said earlier, those are all the symptoms of a greater disease in which we didn't start, but we're trying to implore. So I guess the way I'll wrap it up is LeBron is one person, and he brought a group of people together. And there was a good moment in which a week ago he helped announce, that changing of Dodger Stadium. But over the course of 48 hours in the NBA, they came together collectively by not playing. And it was just announced yesterday that all stadiums, all arenas that were involved in the NBA will be turned into voting places. And so that's like sort of highlighting, while there are a lot of activists and athletes are on the front lines of this, along with everyone else, just because of how we're wired, that's how we care. When we take off our jerseys, we still care. It takes the collective action and the collective one message to actually create change in real time. And that's why there was a lot of emotions regarding should we play or not? Because what we accomplished in 48 hours, could we do more? Are we here to entertain? And that's the struggle that I think I've seen and witnessed in real time the last few days.
Yeah. Another part of this, the movement, there've been various different protests and people using their platforms. Another strong movement that's been happening in the US are, certain monuments have been taken down from, kind of Confederate, heroes that that have challenged the system, have been removed. And so I want to pose this actually to Ibrahim. Why are monuments important? And how can we make more of our cities on the continent reflect, our art and our culture? I think you're on mute. There you go. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So I think in 2000, I've always dealt with the idea of monuments within my work. One of the early ideas that I was working with was how to make work that somehow would both occupy the idea of a monument physically and also just within a much more conceptual sense. And I think in 2018, there was a project in Antwerp, which actually was looking at some of the old monuments, sculptures, which were in the park, like public spaces, which people over years were asking questions about whether they were supposed to be there or not, like some of the Confederate statues in the US. And one of these statues was an old bronze statue, which was made in the early 20th century of a Belgian priest with a so-called Congolese savage at his knee, like claiming some kind of redemption. So the idea was to somehow interrogate this sculpture and the history of it, and also trying to recontextualize it and creating a debate around it, whether leaving monuments within, let's say, the public space. Because once you produce something and you leave it in a public space, then there is a point or a statement that you're making that we all agree with that history. So my point was that sometimes we can somehow maybe make subtle critiques of, let's say, monuments by engaging with them in a certain material sense. So for instance, that work, I worked with a sculptor in Belgium where we remade the sculpture, but not in bronze, because bronze almost immortalizes history or figures, because the idea is that it's supposed to live forever, but we made it in rubber, in almost the same material, which was extracted violently from Congo, which a lot of people, millions of people lost their hands because they couldn't produce enough rubber, or their children couldn't. So the idea of criticizing that, critiquing that through the work, and then somehow also engaging maybe a public through that, I think was very important, because it made me more sensitive and more aware about even spaces within my country, which I had taken for granted. Because there are these group of buildings in Ghana they are not specifically monuments per se, but they are these really magnificent infrastructures that were built in the during the Cold War by Eastern European architects at a time when America and Russia and the USSR was in a struggle. And at the time also, of course, there were a lot of liberation movements, the non-aligned and all that. And some of these infrastructures were built somehow to help in the economic emancipation of the continent through acknowledging the labor that farmers and other people put into the proceeds that they produce, and how that could help us to somehow regain a certain sense of freedom in creating new narratives through wealth and all that. But a lot of those were abandoned in the mid 60s when all these coups d'etat started. Of course, one happened against our own president, then Kwame Nkrumah. So almost 60 years later, the idea of these buildings being there, and then us, generations upon generation, we witness them all the time, but yet still they are very misplaced. We don't actually know what kind of context that they were in and all that. I thought it was somehow very important to somehow focus my gaze as an artist on these specific monuments, and see how maybe through just that simple act of responsibility, the artist somehow reflecting upon the times that he lives in and taking history as a starting point, he can then now go into it and see if we can maybe make a simple gesture, maybe by acquiring it. And then instead of the government proposing that let's demolish these things, but this time around, maybe appropriate it we're going back to the cultural appropriation, appropriate it in a different way that would give an entire generation a new voice, and that point of history would become, for instance, a way in which maybe they can time travel, they can go through the past and somehow maybe experience the future in a very different way.
Yeah. Jidenna, speaking of the movement, I know you've been vocal as well of your thoughts on the Black Lives Movement, and I know you have to run too to make your voice heard today as well in the protest.
Well, I want to echo some sentiments. I know Chiney, you spoke to this, and Pearl as well. Obviously, I'm in the U.S. I'm currently in downtown LA, so I watched everything happen. I've been part of it. I played a role in the background in organizing, and I've been an organizer for years. When the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor wave started to take hold of the U.S. and the world, I was appalled, honestly, by a lot of my peers on the continent for not speaking about what was happening here, and continuing to post their usual glamorized, glitzy world of cars and money and all these things that really were fed to the continent by European ideals. And people didn't focus on what was actually happening in the world. And some of these artists actually had been in the US and have traveled and have toured or produced shows here. And then I finally saw a turn, and I was like, okay, that's good. I think we should be quicker on the draw to protect each other. I would like to see a world where and I've seen it actually with certain Black Americans, when they hear of struggles on the African continent, and we can go back to apartheid and the struggle to free and liberate South Africans. Black Americans did play a role in that, and hip hop culture did. When the Rwandan genocide was occurring, Black people here were appalled by it. And it continues to this day when certain issues take place, awareness in the diaspora of the issues on the continent, and more awareness in the continent of Black American issues and Caribbean American and Afro-Europeans. So that to me, global Black Lives Matter. One of the founders is of Nigerian descent, Opal Tometi. So this is the times that we're in. And I think protection is something I would like to see heads of state offer, not just a letter saying that they acknowledge what's happening and they're appalled by the American government's response. Send some protection here, because I'm terrified. I got stopped by the police with my co-producer, Nana Kwabena, the other day, and they asked us to, literally 2 days ago, they asked us to get out the car and head over to the car. And we didn't know if we were gonna live. That's the other day, right? This has been my whole life. I would love if the heads of state sent some form of protection. I'm not saying military personnel, but some way of standing with us and doing that across the board. I would love if we as a people across the diaspora and the continent also send our protection to women, not just physical, but advocating for women. We really are living in an African identity that is like a double consciousness. We think it's African, but it's been fed by European culture. The idea that an African man, he wants lands, he has to have his car, he has to have 1 or 7 women. We think that is African, but how many of these people have really studied, as Ibrahim spoke about earlier, pre-colonial African history? How many people know that for Igbo people like Obi, Chiney, and myself, that we have had a democratic society for thousands of years? We associate democracy with Europe or Greece or America. We had it. We did this. We associate tattoos with people in the diaspora or Polynesian cultures. We had it. Igbo people had uli. So to me, it's like the more that we know about where we are, the more that we are aware of each other, I think, then the stronger and less of a need to say Black Lives Matter, because we'll just live it and the world will know our value. So that is my prayer, my hope. Thank y'all so much for your time and your attention, for sharing your thoughts. I'm always encouraged, always inspired. And I'm gonna go do the work on the ground, and hopefully we'll all do the work, whatever it is, however we get in and we fit in. So bless y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And Wakanda forever to you today as you go and be about your business.
Rest in peace, Tyler.
Okay, moving on as Jidenna heads out, I know we have some Q&A, so if you are watching and you have some questions, remember to just pinpoint it with a Q&A and we'll try to get to some of those questions. But I'd like to just say pose to the panels, I'd like to know your view on the future of Africa and how you plan to use your platform to help get us there, or what are some of your action points for achieving the future of Africa and your thoughts around it? Starting with Michael.
Thanks. Yeah, I think for the future to be more positive than some of the things that have happened in recent times, I think there needs to be much more support from within the continent of the positive things and aspects of our own cultures that reflect our situations and provide ways forward. For me, one of the a couple of the things that I've started working on. One is an institute called the Nairobi Contemporary Arts Institute, which we opened this year. Sadly, we weren't able to open our space because of the coronavirus, but we've started several projects. And this actually, I feel like my brother Ibrahim over there, we've had quite a few conversations ourselves between, the kind of ethos of starting an institutional space and trying to provide a structure in which a variety of conversations can happen, a point at which you can reflect on the past, as well as, support projects and support, from my perspective, I'm thinking about art, and support art projects that are challenging and difficult and don't have a space because of the current structures and the current or lack of structures and the current lack of support that exists. For me, it's in Kenya. and in Nairobi. So my part is to do what I can to help other people also have space to make their work, to do what I can to support our histories, our various histories, and to provide as much of a platform for them, you know, to exist as well. And my way of doing that has been through Nkai, and also another project that I began in 2017 called The Gathering, where we had, for the first gathering, we had about 50 artists from 12 different countries around the continent. Not too dissimilar to what's happening here in the soft power project, you know, come together to talk about similar issues, differences as well, and turn those conversations into action, and actually, you know, start making something from all of these fantastic ideas and energy that's coming out, and also not be disheartened from the points which, you know, I think Pearl was right. There is a lot of bickering when there are, you know, voices that are heard, when there are ideas put forward, and that's natural, you know, but that isn't a reason to stop, and it's a reason to reconsider or consider perhaps what somebody else's position is, but it's not a reason to not go forward unless there is something like really problematic with your own position.
Yeah, brilliant. Ibrahim.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you. Oh, I
Yeah,
was saying, just your thoughts on can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah, it's just saying your thoughts on the future of Africa, and what are your how will you use your platform to achieve those thoughts, and some of your action plans.
Well, I think that the pandemic period, I hate to say this, but it's been the best time of my life, actually, because I have had more time now to think and reflect and not move. Literally, I haven't been this stable since I was maybe crawling on the floor when I was a baby. My whole adult life, I've been flying everywhere. I've been traveling every week. And for the first time in my life, I just happened to be in one place for all these months. And it's been really magical. Of course, as Michael said, Michael and I had this extensive conversation in London last year about ways in which young artists can exercise responsibility and then work on creating spaces that allow for other artists' works to strive. Because Michael and I work with the same gallery in London, White Cube, and the kind of opportunities that we have, many artists do not have those kinds of opportunities. Sometimes you might think that maybe you are gifted enough. Of course, yes, sometimes we are gifted, but I think it's also important that we do acknowledge the fact that when you find yourself in a certain position, you are privileged enough to be in it. It's not a given right. It's not as if we are too special, that's why we are there, or we have those opportunities. But how do we use the opportunities that we have somehow to help our communities? Like he from Kenya and I from Ghana. And from Ghana, we've not had many institutions over the years. Of course, there are a lot of institutions day in and out who are doing work that aims to allow artists practices to strive and all that. But for me, I've always thought that it's very important to create institutions that just not allow artists to think about just making art, but institutions which can inspire, let's say, a new generation of thinkers. Because I think one of the biggest problems that we have on the continent, actually, it's not about resource or anything. It's always about the thinking. I've always found the thinking on the continent quite very problematic. And it also boils down to education. So through, let's say, artistic interventions, which I said earlier, it's not just through, let's say, an artist. If you acknowledge the fact that, of course, you're a painter or you're a sculptor, like Michael and I come from a background of painting. But what does painting really have to do with, let's say, building an institution or buying, let's say, an old monument from, let's say, the last 70 years, or let's say doing research into, let's say, infrastructure that was built 150 years ago and trying to reclaim it or trying to appropriate it in a way that comes with that history and allows, let's say, a generation to be able to experience it from a point that maybe if it was in a textbook, it would have just been something that they would have experienced in a passive way. So I think that the steady change in form and also introduction of new perspectives is very keen. And I think that within this period, we're trying as much as possible to create spaces that allow for more of these experiences to emerge, and also for certain foundations to be created, so that at least the thinking that we're talking about, we can create conditions which allow for the right set of thinking to emerge, which can somehow change the condition that we have now in the future.
Pearl's giving a clap. Pearl, your thoughts on the future of Africa?
Hey man, now that all the people who think, you know, with university degrees and practical ways of thinking, you know, us dropouts, I still have a lot to learn. Still have a lot to learn. I think for me, I was just trying to write down, because even the first question I had thoughts, and then when I was singled out, I was like, oh, and I got stage fright. But for me, what I wish for the entire continent is that Nigerian confidence. Let's start there. Like, I just want the whole continent to just be like, I'm Black, I'm proud. This is who I am. And I don't care what nobody feel, what nobody think, you know, because that type of confidence affected South Africans a lot. That, you know, and I always openly admit this because I'm hoping South Africans start admitting this, right? Mm-hmm. That when we were sanctioned, when we were isolated as Africans at the bottom here, like literally at the bottom, we had no way of learning, or we weren't allowed to learn about what's happening in the rest on the rest of the continent. So to this day, there are people, you know, my father only left his state, the province, once to watch me do a pageant. Mm-hmm. That was that. And he never really dreamt of leaving the country. It wasn't something he was ever encouraged to even think of. So for me, that type of confidence, like Nigerians need to share where the sauce is coming from. Like they need to let us know. Because I really feel like when I go to Nigeria, I don't want to leave, because I feel a sense of belonging, a sense of pride, a sense of, you know, it's hot and there's lots of traffic, but you know, it's hot. There's that. And then I think that as Africans, to understand our future, we have to understand our past. And our past is we are the place of origin. Well, specifically Africa at the moment, until older bones are discovered somewhere else. But we're the place of origins. That means that China don't exist. That means that Europe don't exist. That means nobody exists without us. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Until the land separated themselves. And for me, what I really dream of, and unlike Mandela, I may never live to see this day, because only a miracle will get not just Black people, but the entire world to think this way. And I dream of a situation where there's borderless consciousness, and I just made this up. But basically, as Africans, as Black people, wherever we are, let's not be constricted by the borders. Okay, they're there. We didn't draw those lines. Those lines were not thought through by us. That was negotiations between European people on who deserves what, because what minerals are going to be there and who slave. The villages, the tribes, how they were separated, and the wars that were caused. And if you were to open those borders now, it will cause just more trouble. But at least up here, we don't have to be living within those borders. And for me, that is something that is really going to help with any sort of Afrophobic/xenophobic issues that we have on this continent and all over the world, to learn to love ourselves enough to love other people, and and respect each other. I think there's a lot of, you know, people who are intellectual, but I think with my heart. And when someone's heart is in the right place, they seem to think and use their intellect to make the right decisions that are going to be better for not just themselves, but for everyone around them. And then also just teaching kids the right history, because we may not be able to change much about what happens in the next 20, 30 years. But the change that is going to be most impactful is the change we may not live to see. And that change will be what we teach our children, to make sure that the future they live in is a secure future for our grandchildren. Let's think like the Chinese, like let's think 200 years down the line. So the books I'm reading for my children are very different to the decisions I was making before I was woke. So I'm looking at my kids like, okay, I've thrown away anything that has Barbie's face on it. Barbie offered me some money, you know, because God will test you, you know what I'm saying? And the Barbie friend people offered me a lot of money to take pictures of my kids with Barbies. I won't even accept Black Barbie at this stage. I will not accept Black Vogue. In fact, with Disney, they do some shady stuff, but you know, Black is king. Do we support it because they are uplifting Black people? But who gets to see what's happening in the bottom line? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who makes the most money really? Do we create our own? Do we create our own platforms, or are we now still forcing white people to put us on their platforms to prove a point that, you know, they care about us? Because we know that a lot of people are really not going to take their money from buying, you know, a Vogue or buying from Adidas. I don't know who owns Adidas, but I'm just using that example. When are we going to stop that so that they really take us seriously? I mean, even with the Netflix. The point though is that, okay, let's take our wins that we can take that will inspire our children. So my children seeing me on Netflix is going to make them think a little bit bigger. So, okay, fine. It's kind of like a loss and a win at the same time. But I won't accept a Black Vogue. You didn't care until it was easy to capitalize on Black skin. You did not bother to come here until it was easy to capitalize on Black culture. So why should I believe you right now? Just because, you know, I speak to agents on the phone as an actor. Yeah, you know, we have an African like department. BITCH, get out of my phone. You know, I'm an actress. Like African section, no. So when it's not trendy to be African in 10 years or whenever you guys decide, let's go focus on South America, then what happens to me? So I refuse all of that, because we need to take ownership of this moment. Maybe we were not prepared for it in terms of the structures, but we need to be unified and we need to think outside. Like I know that I'm doing a lot of the platforms that are hiring me more of a favor than they are doing for me. It's just that when it's taken and it's like, oh, she's the first, whatever, my heart hurts a bit, because I know Africans take me a little bit more seriously now that America has taken me seriously. That hurts. And that was the thing I came back to South Africa for, to prove that, guys, we can be great while we're here. I am taking too long, but I think we get my point. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm not leaving yet, but I'm just trying to.
No, well said, and yeah, necessary. Chiney, your thoughts on the future of Africa?
Well, I love it because I'm getting all my thoughts from Pearl, so it's perfect.
Yeah, Pearl's preaching.
So, like, you know, you said take ownership of the moment. I think the idea is to take ownership, period. Because in Africa, we, you know, it's interesting because I come back home and Pearl started off this conversation talking about the resources, right? Like Africa is known as a place of natural wonder and resources, right? But the best resources are human resource. The human beings that are the people that are actually creating and doing and just need opportunity. And the thing is that the opportunity is controlled by a few, but the entire future is controlled by the many. And so as much as we can take ownership ourselves of what our future is, I think it'll create a better outlook. And the way I've seen this obviously is through sports, just because, you know, when was the shoot? February, I came back home, went to Nigeria, and I've always talked to my mom. My mom went to Queen's College in Lagos, and she always told me about the school that raised her, you know, like, and then she came to the US for college schooling along with my dad. But I've always been curious, and my natural curiosity brought me back because I am a basketball player. I have a brand, you know, Adidas, and I don't own that brand, and I don't own much at this current state of being like 28 years old or so. But what I can own is what I do and what I do with the platform that I have. And so I go back home with whatever. I pack like 9 like suitcases. You know how scary that is, bringing 9 suitcases, like international flight. Like 9 suitcases of, you know, jerseys, practice shorts, sports bras, sneakers, basketballs, everything that I could bring, and just wanted to show the young women at Queens College, which, but when my mom went there, I think there were only 400 students, and now it's about 1,000. I could be getting it wrong, or maybe it's like 4,000. Either way, it was a sea of amazing, beautiful Black girls. And I was blown away because my mom was like, Chiney, you're speaking to the school. I was like, okay. And then I was like, mom, that's a lot of people. But going back and, oh, sorry, one second. Going back and just having that experience of doing what I could with what I had in that moment, it's small things that go such a long way. And I think for me, it's all about creating pathways of ownership. And also that was something you recognize, you know, obviously for art, when it comes to Michael and Ibrahim, but like for you, Pearl, it comes down to what you chose to do with your projects. You can't, you know, you had a huge project in Quantico, but you're like, you know what, let me have a project that I can own on my own and also do it for my own. And so I think it's that constant process of, we're gonna have to do it for ourselves. We can't wait for someone else to create solutions for us. We have to at least use what we can, what we have to make the change that we want. And so that's one. And you know, oh yeah, and I was just saying like about human resources, I've seen this like in sports. Obviously I mean, it's probably gonna be soon, hopefully, Giannis Antetokounmpo will be the next MVP. This is back-to-back MVPs. He's a guy who has made public comments recently about, everyone calls me the Greek freak, but I live in a Nigerian home. And, and I'm curious and I want to know my culture more. There's Joel Embiid of Cameroon, Bismack Biyombo. There's so many players that of African lineage that literally Pascal Siakam started to play basketball, I think at the age of 16, and he was training to be a priest, which is like, you know, normal because my uncle wanted to be a priest. And then all of a sudden he gets into this Basketball Without Borders camp, I believe, you know, with the help of so many great people, like Masai Ujiri, who is the now, you know, the general manager and the president of basketball operations for the Toronto Raptors, who has created a pathway for guys like Pascal and Joel Embiid and Giannis Antetokounmpo and all these guys to be discovered, right? Obviously Giannis is through Greece, but the idea is here that there's so many people, untapped resources, not just in sports, but in the culture period, that if we just quit, and this is where I bring to my second point, Pearl, you talked about Nigerian confidence. Well, we also have too much pride. We have too much pride. We got to put our pride to the side and start creating these pathways for others to capitalize on the opportunities, because we can't own the room until we have enough of our own people there. And as Nigerians, as proud as we are, I think sometimes we get caught up being so competitive for ourselves that we keep the culture back. And so I think that's the whole thing. Like, just, we have to create ownership for ourselves. We have to do it. And the cool thing is, like, shout out to dropouts. I'm not a dropout, but like, we got to have that dropout energy kind of, right? Like the ways of the past are like ladders of success. I have to, you know, go to high school, then I have to go to college, then I have to go get my master's, and I have to wait for my time. Like, that's cute. I love you, Mom. I'm still working. My GRE books won't get done eventually, maybe. But like, now with technology and all the advancements, we don't have to wait. Like, you can have your main hustle be your academics or whatever is your 9 to 5, but your side hustle, what you really want to own, you can work at, and you don't have to do that by yourselves. And so I think, like, I think the whole theme today has just been about, we are all different people. Even look at this panel, like, we're all different people. And I always like analogize it to this. Growing up in Houston, Texas, there was a point when I go to middle school and everyone wanted to wear like those Abercrombie jeans and look like the Abercrombie shirt and like that weird, I mean, it seems weird now, but it's not cute now. And everyone wanted to look the same. But now we're in a society where everyone wants to have an outfit that's different. Everyone wants to get their own swag on that's different. We're celebrating the differences and the beauty and the authenticity. We're being more intentional about the brands we choose. And now we have to hold it to us to not just care about our own individual, you know, idea in our own world, but we have to literally do it for the next generation, knowing that we may not reap the benefits. And if we have that mentality, there's no way that we can go but up, because I think we're in this humbling period right now where we're realizing being by ourselves in a tunnel vision world, it's just going to only create more problems. And that's why we are in pandemic, in the sense that we are forced to stop. We're forced to watch everything. We're forced to reassess. We're forced to recover and recharge. And now we're realizing we actually do care. We actually care about our left person, our neighbors to our left and a person to the right. It's not just something that's isolated in where we are and where we're living. It's something that's global. It's a global shift, a global paradigm shift that's happening. And it's coming from us not caring just about ourselves, but also the fellow man or woman next to you, regardless of how they look. And yeah, that's it. So sorry, I tried to, I get caught up.
No, we have lots of preachers. Lots of preachers here, lots of professors and preachers today. I think, do we have time for one? I think we have one question that came up. And I think this is a really quick one for everyone. But what would you say to young Africans who want to be like you? We'll just go a really quick round robin before we have to wrap up. We'll start with Michael.
I'm mute.
Be yourself.
Be yourselves.
Be yourself.
Be yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they should be patient.
Patience. Okay. Pearl. You're mute.
Ah, man, I did Ibrahim's stance. Sorry. I think Michael's kind of hit the nail on the head, because sometimes we want to make it a lot deeper, but it's really hard to be yourself, especially in the world that we all live in. Like, we live in a world where we have to take what we do and give it to the world and share it with the world. And that's really, really hard. And I think for women, when you have things like imposter syndrome, when you have things like, gender inequality, it can be really, really hard. And I mean, I'm one of the most hated in my country because I'm myself and I speak my mind, and people hate that I'm not following the rules that are being created on social media for celebrities. They hate me for it. And the fact that they'll say, you're not allowed to sing Brown Skin Girl, and I'll find a video of Beyonce saying all shades. Then they hate me even more. It's sometimes you've got to make sure you can sleep at night,
Yeah.
And I just want to kind of focus on building on that, because the only time you can really enjoy your success is when you are enjoying living in it, because you are being yourself and you are proud of where you are, and you can make changes that make you comfortable. And you don't have to kind of keep up appearances or keep up with things that are unsustainable, because that illusion, because we live in a world where we create illusions, or we create reflections of the society that is impacting us. So for me, there's that. And Ava, I just want to say thank you. I brought up those things that I brought to see there. Ava, you saw the light through BET Africa ages ago. You saw us.
That part.
Right. But you saw us before Netflix, before everybody. You saw us, and you created that stage, and year by year you made it bigger, because sometimes you got to start small with certain things and build on that. And I just want to say thank you so much. I never thought I'd be on a BET carpet, speaking to certain people, mingling. I mean, to this day, South Africans are like, Paul was sitting next to Cardi B, BET Awards 2017 before Bodak Yellow. I'm like, that's how I even got to sit there. But the point is, I was there. And for me, I just want to, in behalf of all, international artists, but specifically artists from Africa who could have never dreamt of being on those stages, the Caspers, the AKAs, the Amanda Blacks, the Shoma Josies, it's because of the dream you dreamt and you put it out there. And I just want to say, man, thank you so much, because you've allowed us to dream bigger and think bigger, and be, sometimes when you realize you can actually be in a room with Busta Rhymes, who was my first favorite rapper, I'm like, next thing I can be Busta Rhymes or whomever's in that room that I look up to. And I think the fact that you gave us those tickets and you allowed us into those spaces, not really knowing how we were going to act, but you let us in there and you allowed us to be the best version of ourselves, and you learned our names. You called us by our names, and you gave us just the amount of respect that we sometimes don't even get from our own at home. And I just want to say, I haven't forgotten what you did for us. And I want to thank you for everyone, Nomzamo, myself, Nandi, you saw us, and we are so, so grateful. And we are definitely not going to take that for granted. We're going to carry that torch and send it to Kamobushe, to my little girl right here. We're going to pass it. And you've done more than you ever imagined. You done for this little girl. There's Tando on the camera. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And to piggyback off of that, she said, you know, it's all about visual representation, but now we're all saying you cannot be what you cannot see. And it doesn't mean what's in front of the camera. It's a lot of times the people behind the camera, the people that step behind to create those pathways. And you haven't just done it for your area, your continent, you've done it globally on a global scale. So again, cosign, retweet everything Pro said.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, I really appreciate that, Pearl and Chiney. Obviously, I've been doing this work for a really long time. I always believed in my heart that we are stronger together, that we are so not a monolithic people, and that there is talent and stories all over the world that deserve to be told. So it's been my pleasure to do this work, and I feel like I'm just getting started. It's passion, purpose that drives me.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ava. Thank you to you guys have been inspirational. I mean, we've had really amazing panels, I have to say, but I'm almost moved to tears by this panel because I feel inspired. I feel, you know, I want to stand and clap because you are the people we're looking up to, our girls are looking up to, our boys are looking up to, and you guys are so amazing. Ava, you are special. Thank you so much for this time. And thank you guys for all being here and showing up right. Thank you so much. We're inspired by you. Honestly, I feel really emotional about this. Thank you so much. And you know, wrap up before I start crying on camera. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Guys were incredible.
Hey.
Amazing.
Everybody who joined us. Hey.
Thank you guys so much. That was very special.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We're logging off. Time to go.
Oh, right, okay. I was just going to say, because I think I said it before the panel started.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, Chala is immortal as an African king. You know, we keep him forever. He's already with the ancestors. So even though we mourn him, we celebrate him. Incredible panel. I just been trying to not interrupt and not say a word the whole time. Pearl, you're a revolutionary, man. I didn't know you were like that. Michael and Ibrahim, you got to keep us connected with that Nairobi contemporary scene, please.
Guys, I was in another. Sorry to distract. I've already sent Chiney. Is it Chiney or Chiney? What's the way she wants us to pronounce it?
Chiney.
Chiney. Okay.
Yeah.
I've already DM'd her, like, I'm sending in my application to be a friend. And I do this with a panel that I really enjoy. I did another panel a few days ago with African women for Google. And it was so good. Like, I was so good that I had to ask for everybody's details, at least Instagram handles. So whoever has that, please DM them or WhatsApp them or whatever to me. I'd like to keep in contact with everybody and randomly I think it's so important for us to not just broadcast these type of moments, but actually sit together and like monthly, like, hey guys, so what's happening in your country? I don't understand. That's what I'm reading in the papers. Is that really what's happening? You know, just to have a greater understanding, especially for me as a South African. I feel there's so much I need to learn. Like sometimes I go to like a Tanzania and people talk about all the other countries as if they're still in the same country. And I want to be that way, and I want to teach my country to be that way. So if that's okay, can I please have your guys' details or Instagram handles or both? I'd really appreciate it so that we can keep this conversation going and reach.
Definitely. We'll share all of that stuff. You guys are amazing. We need to shut down now. And Thank you so much. And we'll share it by email as well. So
Yeah, ditto, Pearl. Ditto, everyone. That was awesome. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Nice, guys. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Telling you.
Thanks, Obi. Thanks.